Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist, and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, I'm Becky Parker Geist, and I want to welcome you to the Audiobook Connection podcast, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I am not only the host of this podcast, but also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the CEO of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks. And I am pleased to have with me today Sally Barrilla, who is the author of The Doctor. The toxic combination of love, hatred, and revenge is served. So, Sally, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
So I understand this is your debut novel. Is that right?
Yes, actually. I self-published it back in December 2021, and it's been an absolute blast. I truly just love writing. And even though it's my first novel, I'm still going to continue going.
Yeah, that's great. I want to give our listeners just a brief description as we head into it. So, and I pulled this from Amazon. So it says, how far will a person go to defend someone they love? In Sally Barrilla's psychological thriller, The Doctor, a fearless private detective uses passion and determination in her journey to seek revenge against a ruthless doctor and regain a form of peace. Sort of, what was the inspiration for this book in the first place?
Absolutely. So for me, I really love Lifetime movies, and I've been a really big lover of true crime, suspense, thrillers. And it's completely fiction, but I had a dream one day of a mother, sort of me as a private detective, and I'm basically searching for revenge for someone. I'm basically really wanting to seek revenge off something that's been taken from me that I really want to just give them a taste of their own medicine. And I started having a lot more dreams about it. And basically, I just thought, wow, this seems really intense. And the more Lifetime movies I was looking at where someone's always been like maybe a bad doctor, a bad nurse, and you find out and you're trying to like basically take initiative for revenge, I thought that seems really cool. And I decided, why not really create a psychological thriller novel? Basically, we all have people that we love and cherish in our everyday lives. If someone that we thought that we could trust harmed them, did something that was really awful to them, how would our dark side come out? Would we choose to move forward or take revenge? So I basically wanted to bring the question, for our loved ones, the ones that we would cherish, whether it's a sister, a spouse, a child, what would we do to really seek revenge to defend them? And I basically just wanted to bring that question out there, as well as just really emphasize, do we move forward or do we choose forgiveness or revenge? And it was really interesting just bringing on that really little big message, for our loved ones. Do we fight fire with fire, or what do we do? And I really just found it super interesting, all of these little lessons that I learned throughout the book.
Yeah. And I understand you have a podcast as well. Can you tell our listeners what the podcast is?
Yes, absolutely. So after I published my book back in 2021, I decided, why stop there? I decided to make a blog called Detective Writer. And at first, I wasn't really sure how I'd go about it, but I thought, okay, I love murder mystery. Maybe I could discuss some unsolved crimes as well as discuss my journey of writing. And then I thought, from making a blog, why stop there and then make a podcast? And then basically, I actually have a friend who is a very good podcaster himself, but he does more Justice League, Marvel, things like that. And he's always saying that I have the voice for a podcast. You could really reach out to people. And at first, I was kind of nervous about it because, it's bringing my voice out there, really getting myself into a more public setting. And then I thought, it sounds really cool. It's out of my comfort zone, but why not go for it? And I did my first few episodes. My friend who does podcasts taught me everything that he knows. So I decided to make a podcast called Detective Writer as well from my website. And then, wow, sort of a mix of true crime, discussing unsolved crimes, unsolved murders, unsolved disappearances. And then having also my journey of writing. And then I also have other authors who discuss their writing journey as well. I also have other guests who are not writers at all, but just want to have a chat. And it's been absolutely incredible. I've taken a few hiatuses, like this summer I took one, but now I'm on season 5, and I gotta say, it's an absolute blast. I'm not perfect at it, but I honestly found myself just gaining more confidence behind a camera, really learning how to talk to people. And even though I don't record video, I only record audio, it's still such an incredible opportunity because I've gained so many new friends, connections, opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And something that I've highlighted to our followers is how a podcast can be really helpful in the promotion of your books and audiobooks. And what kinds of things have you been doing on your podcast to help, within the content of your podcast? What are some things that you've been doing to help promote your books or your book?
Absolutely. So with me, I definitely utilize a lot of social media. I have an Instagram page that is for myself. I like to post on my stories, when a new episode comes out, which is usually Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 Pacific. And I usually just love to also make like little TikTok reels saying, hey there, new episode today. Or really, if I will just use social media as much as I can. And if I have a guest, they're usually super nice to let me include them into my stories using their usernames, so many things like that. I actually have thought about making an Instagram specifically for my blog and podcast, but I thought I might do that in a few months, just definitely see like how it pans out. But I also just love, just really learning how to engage with people. I also have a few sponsors, few subscribers, and they usually get emails out and they love it. So it's really just super interesting, just spreading the word out.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I thought it would be really interesting because usually on this podcast, we have authors who have already produced their audiobooks, and you are in the early stages. So I thought this might be really interesting for our listeners to hear a little bit more about where you are in the process. And so I'm going to ask you a few things that typically we at Pro Audio Voices, when we're having that initial call with folks, with authors, I'm going to ask you some of those questions and then also ask you about some of the, just a little more on the recording side, since you have, you told me that you're starting off with recording your own. This is a great time, I think, for us to be having this chat. So I want to ask you a little bit about what you would say at this point, or even, as you're thinking about when you were first making the decision about recording the audiobook, what would you say was feeling like maybe was the biggest challenge in that?
Definitely. So thank you so much. I would say one of the biggest challenges that when it's come to first really making an audiobook for my book is really learning how to get into that mindset again of a person who's seeking revenge. I would say that I consider myself a generally positive person, but I would say that because I like to think that I based the main character, the protagonist, Detective Sasha Thomas, on me, basically it sort of is another version of me. I really found it really kind of interesting learning how to become a person, who has such anger, such negativity, who hasn't learned how to move on from the past. So for me, I really learned how to just really learn how to get into someone's mindset, really learning how to extenuate my voice. And as well as having a little bit of a cold has not helped me either. But I definitely think that, learning how to get into someone's mindset, learning how to evaluate their emotions, really learning how to mimic exactly what they were thinking, what they want to be portraying in a moment, as well as learning how to mimic my voice as sort of a male perspective, because I don't really know how to make my voice too deep. But that is definitely something super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so really you're describing that process of acting, of really getting into the characters. And what would you say, do you have any previous experience with acting or performing in that way, aside from your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, for about 2 years now, Because I live in New York, I think it's been really great to go on Backstage, and it's sort of a platform where anyone can be extras for movies, story times, as well as TV shows. I actually have done a few voiceover work as well through a few studios and things like that. It's usually been more just discussing my personal experience writing my book or really just getting into content creation. But it's only been small things, but it's definitely been really great to prepare, to we learn how to get into the zone of, okay, we're not just Sally today, we're somebody else today, or we're just gonna be someone in the background, but really learning how to get into it creatively.
Yeah, that's great. And sort of flipping around to looking at the other side of things, what would you say is overall with your publishing project? What's your biggest goal?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for asking. I would say the biggest goal I have in publishing is, aside from having published when I was 23, I accomplished the biggest goal was being finally able to be saying that I'm a published author. But I do want to be able to publish a lot more. I used to say that I wanted to publish maybe a 1,300-page book, maybe somewhere in the next few years. We shall see. But I would say my next biggest goal right now is to be able to publish my father's book. My dad has always said, after publishing my book, he's just noticed how much creativity and imagination there is brought by writing. So he basically said, "Why did you publish a book about my life?" And I said, absolutely. So that is actually my biggest goal right now. We're currently working on it together. He's talking, I'm typing, but it's still super interesting to get to know stuff about my dad's life, get to know about people who meant a lot to him, and really even text me now on WhatsApp or on Messenger saying, "Oh, I want to be here. I want to do this. In 1985, we did this." So it's super interesting. And I would say that's my biggest goal, getting my dad's book published. And I can't guarantee it'll be a bestseller, but to be able to know that my dad's story is out there, that he's asked me to do this, and I want to carry that commitment.
Yeah. And what would you say is maybe your favorite thing about writing?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would say my absolute favorite thing about writing is that there's no rules, in my opinion, that writing can be so imaginative, it's creative, it can scare the wits out of people, it can be educational, informative. I really like about writing is that I can really pour my heart and soul into something. I really believe in the power of journaling, and also that this is my personal motto, that if you can't say something, write it down. And I think that with me, I've really learned that writing, it takes so many different forms. And I find that for me, it's so comforting to know that I can write down whatever I'm thinking if I'm not able to say it out loud. And it's just super comforting. I just love how writing can be imaginative, creative, and it can sort of be healing. I learned how to let go of so many things, learning how to grow as a writer and as a person through it. And I just love it. I'm always either typing or just writing something on a notepad.
Let's just take a short pause and we'll come right back and talk more about the audiobook and what you're doing in terms of that recording. We'll be right back. Would you like to earn more from your audiobook sales? If you're an author with an audiobook, you may have noticed that royalties from Audible especially, and other platforms as well, are frankly kinda pathetically low, disappointingly low, and unfairly low considering what it cost you in effort and resources to create it. How is it the retailers are the ones making all the money off your work and investment? As someone who started in the audiobook industry in 1981, I've found it frustrating that authors keep getting shortchanged. The good news is that Pro Audio Voices just launched Amplify Audiobooks, a direct sale audiobook platform for authors that puts you back in the driver's seat. Earn 65% of the gross sales price that you set. Compare that to the percentage of the percentage that retailers give. Run promotions on schedule whenever you want. Create coupon codes. Build community with your customers, since you'll know who they are and how to contact them. Work with a caring, responsive, supportive team to help you succeed all along the way. Get help with marketing. Get paid weekly. We're helping audiobook authors who are frustrated by painfully low royalties and the barriers that prevent them from managing their own products and customers. Amplify Audiobooks is a direct sale platform that enables authors to earn much higher royalties and have way more control. We're disrupting the audiobook industry by putting authors first. Get started today at proaudiovoices.app or go to proaudiovoices.com and click on the Distribution Amplify link. Join the movement. So, Sally, you've started now in this process of recording your own audiobook, and I would love for you to share with our listeners, because many of our listeners are considering recording their own audiobooks, and it can be a scary thing, especially if you don't have any experience with audio or recording or any of that. Could you share, now you obviously have some experience going into it, which has, I think, probably made you feel a little more comfortable with that decision. Tell us, if you would, what so far has felt like the biggest challenge. And if it's something you've already talked about, just go ahead and delve a little deeper into that.
Absolutely. So I would say one of the biggest challenges I've noticed that when it comes to really recording an audiobook is, really learning how to find time as well, because I live with my family, learning how to find a quiet place usually to just record. But also, I would say, I think I've said it before, just really learning how to get into my character's mindset, whether they be male, female, whether they were in a place of extreme hatred, extreme negativity, really learning how to combat that and just learning how to be okay. If I'm someone who has seeking revenge because something wrong was done to my child, even though I have no kids, how would I want to portray that? How would I want to effectively show someone that I've heard your struggles, I have been exactly where you are, and I will fight for you? I really think that it's just super interesting to know that, okay, we all have different mindsets. We all have different perspectives, no matter what happens in our lives. How would I portray my characters effectively to communicate that they were in a place of such pain, such negativity, and such in a place that all they saw was just fire in their eyes, that they were just willing to just go for whatever meant possible for revenge.
Right.
That definitely is interesting, because I generally consider myself a positive person. I believe in the mindset, that no matter what, you should always take the path of forgiveness, righteousness. But for me, it just really felt like, wow, how do I effectively portray a character that for so many people, it's a reality? How do I make it? I'm passionate, and I will show exactly how it is.
Have you found that in that process, so I'm going to elaborate a little bit on when I say that process, because I think that writing itself, you've written these characters. On one level, you've already stepped into what are they saying, what are they feeling, and then, creating that in your writing. And now taking this next further step into actually performing in your audiobook, performing these characters. What would you say, have you learned something more about your characters as a part of the process?
Absolutely. One thing I really learned about my characters is that even though we are nothing alike, we're actually a lot similar than I thought. We're everyday human beings. We're everyday people who are just trying to get by in life. All we want is to have someone that we can connect to, someone that we can be there for, and vice versa. And one thing I really learned about my character, Detective Sasha Thomas, is that she's someone who's gone through a lot of hardship, just like myself, someone who has had people that she thought that she could trust, and obviously could not, because she's been betrayed like myself. But also remembering that we are all human beings, like I said. At the end of the day, we're going to make mistakes, but that doesn't mean that we can't move forward from it, learning how to take steps on how to become better human beings. And I would say one thing that I've also learned about my other character, Dr. Jonathan Rivera, who's basically the bad guy in the book, is that sometimes, and not justifying obviously the murder of a child or anybody, but when you get really confused, or when you're basically treated as an outsider all of your life, it can definitely bring a lot of negative impacts on so many people. Or for Sasha's coworker, Ray, when you really just want to be heard, when you really just want somebody to listen to you, and when you want to be there for someone, but they're not exactly letting you in. It can definitely take a lot of tries before someone can finally fully trust you, be able to build a relationship with you, a connection. So I basically found like we all have so many human traits that we all want to get better with, that we all want to have someone to understand us, to be able to connect with. And it's definitely super interesting because I thought that me and Sasha were nothing alike, but we're actually exactly alike. We're humans who've made mistakes, but we have to take every single day and remember that every day is something new. You never know what it can bring. And that's something so beautiful. I noticed about it.
That's great. And where can our listeners learn more about, how to find your book? Where do you have a website that they could go to?
Absolutely. So I have a website called detectivewriter.com. So basically detectivewriter.com. I can also send you the links for it. You can also find me, my social media, my book, blog, podcast. And it's absolutely super interesting because I usually publish my blog post as well as a podcast episode together every morning usually every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm always looking for so many listeners, so many people to tune in, and absolutely. And I actually have social media on Instagram, Maltese Falcon 210. I'm always super interested to talk to anyone. And yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Sally Barrilla, the author of The Doctor, The Toxic Combination of Love, Hatred, and Revenge is Served. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you again, Becky.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.